Welcome to your annual compliance training on bullying. I'm Dr. Tony Walker, Senior Director of Student Support Services here at Uplift Education, and I'll be your guide for this training, where we'll outline a few key pieces of information related to bullying that you'll need to know as an educator, including the legal definition of what bullying actually is, statistics and facts about bullying, the psychological impacts of bullying, and most importantly of all, what you need to know about the actions you are required to take and the procedures you are required to follow if you suspect that bullying might be occurring. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the training. So let's start with the definition. And yes, it's a very long definition of what bullying is. Bullying means a single significant act or a pattern of acts by one or more scholars directed at another scholar that exploits an imbalance of power and involves engaging in written or verbal expression through electronic means, or physical conduct that has the effect or will have the effect of physically harming a scholar, damaging property, or placing a scholar in reasonable fear of harm to the scholar's person or damage to their property. It has to be sufficiently severe, persistent, and pervasive enough that the action or threat creates an intimidating, threatening, or abusive educational environment for a scholar. Now, note that this definition is guided by state law, and bullying could be one single really impactful event or a series of events. It can take place in a lot of different forms, in a lot of different places. It can involve psychological harm, physical harm, damage to property, or even just the threat of harm. It's complex, but important to understand because bullying can look like a lot of different things. Schools are also responsible for stopping any instances of cyberbullying. This is bullying that occurs through electronic means, for example, on social media, and may not involve any physical interaction at all. But if it impacts the school day, schools are legally responsible to investigate and intervene. Let's talk just through a few stats about bullying nationwide. You'll notice that about half of students ages 13 to 17 report being bullied each school year, but only 1 in 10 told their parents about the incident. 6 in 10 teens, more than half, said that the bully probably didn't see the action as a big deal. And again, about half, 45% of bullies, did not feel that he or she would get caught bullying, and 47% did not perceive any tangible consequences. On average, girls experience a little more bullying than boys. Bullying can have extreme psychological long-term impacts on victims, including the possibility of depression and anxiety, feelings of sadness or loneliness, changes in sleeping and eating patterns, loss of interest in activities that students used to enjoy, other health complaints, and some of these issues may even persist into adulthood. Some studies have also suggested that bullying is correlated with decreased academic achievement. Both GPA and standardized test scores went down when scholars were being bullied. These students are also more likely to miss, skip, or ultimately drop out of school. There's also impacts on bullies themselves. Bullies are statistically more likely to abuse alcohol and other drugs through the rest of their lives. They're more likely to get into fights, vandalize property, or drop out of school. They're more likely to engage in risky behaviors or have criminal convictions or even traffic citations as adults. And ultimately, bullies are more likely to be abusive towards their romantic partners, spouses, or children later in life. So how can you as an educator identify those students who might be victims of bullying and bullies themselves? Well, it's easy if you know some telltale signs to look for. Victims of bullying are often loners. They might appear anxious, depressed, or quieter than other students. Many times victims don't want to go to school and they're concerned about getting to and from school. You might also notice changes in their social interactions or even the way they interact with you. Many times victims of bullying have unexplained injuries, torn clothes, missing or damaged supplies, missing property, or money. Oftentimes, victims of bullying have a history of being a target in the past. Bullies, on the other hand, often get involved in physical or verbal fights. They may have other friends who bully others. Oftentimes, there's patterns of increasing aggression. This might be a kid who is regularly sent to the principal's office for violating the code of conduct. They may show up in your class with unexplained extra money or brand new belongings with no explanation of how they got those things. Many times bullies do not want to accept responsibility for their actions, and they can be competitive and focused on popularity and reputation. As an educator, you have an incredible opportunity to notice bullying and ultimately intervene early on. If you're a teacher, you have a natural sense for what's going on in your classroom and between your scholars. If something is happening, ask questions, evaluate the severity. Remember, you're in a fact-finding mission. Children are impacted even if they are not the bully or the victim. And again, legally, we have a responsibility to intervene. So the first thing to do is recognize that a problem exists. Then ask questions. What behaviors do you observe? What are scholars actually telling you? Are students being harmed? Do they feel safe at school? Do you notice any sort of imbalance in power? Then it's time to take action. First, you must complete the bullying incident report form, which I'll show you on the next screen. And then use your power to intervene while campus leadership investigates. So here's the bullying incident report form. This should be available at various locations in your school. If you can't find it, let your school leadership team know and they'll get you a copy. I know, filling out forms is never fun, but it's important, and in this case required by law and Uplift education policy. You can also submit this form electronically. This might be especially useful if you are teaching virtually. Essentially, this form is a fact-finding sheet of the who, what, where, when, and how something occurred, so that an investigation can begin. So what happens after you submit a bullying incident report form? Well, an investigation begins. Typically, school leaders have about 10 days per Uplift education policy to complete their investigation. During that time, they are gathering information, conducting interviews with any witnesses, looking at other evidence such as video surveillance, maybe even conducting searches, whatever they need to do to determine whether or not bullying has occurred. Once an investigation has begun, parents must be notified within 3 business days. Ultimately, school leaders will arrive at a conclusion. Has bullying occurred? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, the school leader will apply an intervention that is appropriate to make bullying stop. What this intervention is really will depend on the specifics of that individual situation. Ultimately, findings will be delivered in writing to parents and guardians of all parties involved. Notes are put into PowerSchool, and then we schedule follow-up and monitoring to make sure that bullying has truly stopped. Possible interventions that school leaders may apply are restorative actions, parent-student conferences, positive behavior interventions, referral to RTI SST, sometimes using mentors or safe people, referrals to counselors, loss of privileges, etc. The possibilities are really endless. The important thing is to make sure that bullying stops. It's also important to know that per David's law in the state of Texas, bullying can sometimes be an expellable offense, especially if scholars engage in bullying that encourage another student to commit or attempt to commit suicide, if they incite group violence against a student, or if they release or threaten to release intimate visual material of another student without the student's consent. So what can you do as a teacher? Well, the first thing is to recognize and call the bullying behavior what it is. Be upfront with what you have seen and that you are concerned. Discuss the situation. Be positive but neutral. Don't yell at students. This only reinforces their own bullying behavior. But talk to them about how unacceptable it is to be a bully. Help them brainstorm ways to manage their anger in more positive ways. Teach and model empathy. Ultimately, it's your responsibility to report and document. As an educator, there are many strategies that you can employ to reduce bullying in your classroom and in your school. The first and most important is to take actions to ensure that your classroom is a safe place for all scholars. Do this by using a supportive and fear-reducing style. Foster strong relationships with your kids and open communication with scholars so that they feel comfortable telling you when something's going on. Don't forget that excellent classroom management is really the foundation of decreasing bullying from happening in the first place. Always demonstrate compassion and empathy when listening. Connect victim to other helpful peers that can be a safe place for them. And remember that the ultimate responsibility is to document and report suspicions of bullying immediately to school leaders. This concludes your annual compliance training on bullying. By working together, paying attention to the signs and symptoms of bullying, and then taking swift action to intervene when it's happening, we can make Uplift Education schools safer for all scholars. Thank you for your attention. Following this training is a short quiz, and then you're done. Enjoy the rest of your day.